I couldn't understand what the crown prince was saying, still I was short of breath. I stared blankly at the enemy nailed to me and barely opened my mouth, as though I had given up my breath. What are you saying now? Let's not just provide a lot of rumors, but let's meet for real. The clear voice of Callisto struck me blind. It was just a weird thing and my heart was pounding like crazy. I clenched my teeth. But unlike usual, when I clenched my teeth and held my breath, these strange feelings that had been lifted up to the tip of my neck continued to haunt me. Is that such a surprise? Callisto tilted his head to his side, looking at me, standing at him helplessly. I thought you were somewhat like me. If anyone sees it, they might think that I was the only one who dreamed about what happened in the maze garden. I was in a hurry when he said something about my shameful past. When the crown prince said anything to live. When he saw me making a reflexive impression, he burst into a sarcasm and asked, "Are you still angry about what happened then?" "What happened? What I did to thrust a sword into your neck?" I opened my eyes wide at his words. It was surprising that he still cared about it, but I realized that I had forgotten it for a long time. I'm sure until now I'm still a little nervous. I hate it. Since when has it changed like this? Surprisingly, Callisto was no longer disgusting enough that I didn't hate seeing his shadows anymore. These days, every time I face him, I feel like I don't know who he is. If I give you a sword and ask you to cut my neck equally, will that make you feel better? But the crown prince uttered a terrifying sound as to whether I, who was silent, still took the matter as a matter of concern. I shook my head in surprise. No, that was just an accident. Come on, take it. But a huge activist lunatic was after. He took something out of his bosom. A flaming sword with a clear inscription of the yellow dragon. What he offered me was a dagger. Hey, what the hell is this? I couldn't bring the black one because it was my birthday party. Slightly cut with this instead. Then he tapped his finger on his neck. It was the side that had blood stains leaked from the earlobe. I looked at him and the daggers alternately, and then screamed. What are you trying to do? That's it. Why, I have the artifacts you gave me and I'll have them treated right away. Who's going to be beheaded for treason? It's dangerous, so put it in quickly. As I shuddered with a grimace, the crown prince smiled with a cheerful face instead of putting the dagger in. So now you're not going to get along with me, are you? I stared blankly at him like a madman, and suddenly I noticed something. The moonlight is flickering over the golden head. A siren. I regarded the red favorability gauge bar, similar to the color of the crown prince's eyes, as a dangerous sign. As a siren, so far Callisto's favorability has not been confirmed. He was the crown prince of this empire, and I thought he was the most distant man from my escape. But now I'm not sure. Maybe I've been turning a blind eye to the point of unconsciousness. Because, Your Highness, I stretched my arm forward and gently clasped over the hand still holding out a dagger toward me. And the moment he faced the sudden contact, his red pupil getting a little bigger. System, do you want to check Callisto's favorability? 2 million gold, 200 fame. Splitting between us, a white square window rose in the air. System, subtract 2 million gold to check the favorability of Callisto. Remaining funds 42 million gold. And the white writing on Callisto's head changed straight away. Favorability 76%. When I saw the rising popularity, I felt indescribable. At the same time, feelings of relief and heavy emotions unknown came to my heart. It was similar to disappointment. Hey princess, when I was staring at his head, Callisto suddenly awakened me. It was a mysterious glance, whether I was weird without words while holding hands. I put my hand away from the back of his hand. What's wrong with your expression all of a sudden? I didn't know what kind of facial expression I was wearing. It was all over at favorability 76%. Nevertheless, I couldn't stop open smiling. Just in case, Your Highness, say it. Do you love me? The crown prince's eyes grew larger than before. He asked back as if he had heard an unfamiliar word. Love? Yes. Are you asking me out because you love me, princess? Callisto stared at me with a very embarrassed look, and then quickly shed a sound. Isn't that such a naive word that doesn't suit us so much? What's wrong with you? That's what the princess said on the eve of the hunting competition. What you said, you'll find a more suitable person who fits your position. At that moment my head went blank, as if someone hit me in the back of the head. The feeling that I thought was similar to disappointment became something bigger and upset me. The crown prince did not notice my condition at all. He said, stroking his chin, come to think of it, makes sense, but your idea is wrong. We are in a position that is most necessary and suitable for each other in reality. It's the combination of the prince whose seat is at stake, and the ugly duckling from the Duke. And apart from that, it makes me feel comfortable and pleasant to be with you. Don't we fit in pretty well, Princess? No matter how crazy you are now, it would be no different from other young people to marry you after the coming-of-age ceremony. The Crown Prince put the dagger in his arms and looked straight at me. So just come to me now. I think we can be pretty good partners. He shrugged and grinned as usual. It's no different than it was just now, and my face only felt strange. We could be a haven for each other in this fucking empire. I belatedly understood him. That the relationship he asked for a while ago was not an exchange of emotions, but a choice that was born for complex reasons. Unlike me, who is looking at this as a love simulation game, he is cool-headedly facing his reality. Well, there was only 76%, and his love is frozen to death. Of course, 76% couldn't say he didn't like me. I finally managed to admit it. What are these strange sensations that make me cry? I had a crush on the Crown Prince, who was able to treat me without the slightest calculation, or I had a fondness for the Crown Prince who could have been treated without careful calculation. He and me too, we had feelings for each other, but that was all romantic feelings such as crab love were useless in the current Crown Prince whose status is at stake. It was the same for me, 4% and 24%. It can't even be compared. The first priority for me was to survive and escape, and the ceremony was only a little over a week left. Unlike the hostess of normal mode, I was in no position to play with a faintly blooming favorability. The half-dreamed head cooled and the reason gradually returned. It was only natural. By the way, I couldn't tell why I lost all my strength on my toes. I thought I'd stagger unseemly if I let my nerves relax a little bit. I stared straight at the Crown Prince, clearing my collapsing body. I don't want to have that kind of relationship with you, Your Highness. Your Highness the Emperor. Then I heard the shout of the servant over the glass door. At the same time, the vibrating sound spread from the Crown Prince's arms. Damn it, this dog Cedric Porter is freaking out again. He took out a nervous twinkling crystal ball and quickly moved it to me, standing in a daze. How soon is your coming-of-age ceremony? Don't answer now, but be more sensitive until then, and please answer me on the coming-of-age ceremony, Princess. No, it's not something to worry about anymore. The Crown Prince blocked my mouth, which I was about to say no with his palm, and said like a threat with red eyes glistening brightly, "It's so miserable to have a difference on your birthday. Don't you think so? Thanks for the gift, Princess. Take some time and come out slowly. There might be rats on this side that are still interested." Listen, my answer, Your Highness. The curtain fluttered before the Crown Prince grabbed my hand, which had been blocking my mouth, and escaped like a flash of lightning. I was left alone in a quiet terrace hall. I stared at the Crown Prince's rapidly moving back and soon closed the curtains with a low sigh. Like he said, it was good to take some time, but when I was left alone I suddenly felt a deep fatigue. Time passed, and it was time to go out, but I didn't dare to go back to the banquet hall. I'll pretend I'm okay again. I'll put my mask back on as if nothing happened again and deal with the ML who are looking at me and talking to me. In this messed up mood, I wasn't really confident of doing it well. Shall I just go looking beyond the railing? I had such an impulse. Why do I have to stay here? All I had to do was pay attention to the level of favorability and the ML. There was no reason to keep the duty of the noble family the background of the game cumbersome. Sneaking down, it was a little high to be on the first floor, but it was enough to jump. Let's go. I rolled up my skirt and climbed up the railing without further thinking. Just before jumping down, the Duke's face flashed through my mind. But it was not a part of the job for Penelope, who was always fickle. There was a dead silence near the banquet hall where the Emperor's congratulatory address was in full swing. I called the servant waiting outside the banquet hall and borrowed a carriage. How long have I been watching the splendid streets of the capital city, with my head leaning against the window? The carriage stopped, but the destination was a far-off gate not in front of the door of the mansion. "Princess, you can't go in any more." The horseman opened the side window and said carefully. Sneaking out the window on the other side, I saw the gatekeepers firmly guarding the gate. This is because the outer carriage cannot be brought into a mansion without an owner, although the patterns of the imperial palace were painted. Shall we ask the gatekeepers to call the Duke's carriage? No thank you. I gave the horseman some spare gold coins and opened the carriage door. Are you going, Princess? The soldiers, alerted to the sight of an outsider approaching the mansion without any notice, stood down from the carriage and opened their eyes wide at me. Why are you alone at this time? The superior skillfully led me when he was asleep to be embarrassed by an unexpected figure. I'll send a message to the butler, and call the carriage right away. There's no need to make a fuss, just open the door. But I'm going for a walk. It was quite a distance from the gate to the mansion by carriage. But at my command the gatekeepers had no choice but to open the gate. A huge iron gate slowly opened its mouth. Well, I'll take you to the front of the mansion, a young soldier courageously spoke to me. I belatedly realized that the attitudes of the guards had become very cautious and extreme, unlike before. I felt a little strange. No, don't follow me. I shook my head and immediately moved when I saw that the door was open enough to go out, and moved right away. As I moved away from the brightly lit gate, the well-polished road quickly became dark. It seemed to have left at sunset, and returned right away from the banquet hall, but it had already been a whole night. The night air was cold. I strolled along. I really wanted to do the book I bought. I was trying to clear my mind and replan what I'd do next, but I didn't think of anything while I was moving. I had a dreamy sensation, as if I were just walking on a dream path. It was strange. How long had I walked like that? Thanks to my slow but diligent footwork, I was able to see a familiar mansion far away. I should go back to my room quickly and lie down. All I could think about was how I wanted to wash up and sleep. The pace quickened. It was when I reached before the front door across the vast garden. A fine sound pierced my ears from somewhere. Bird. I paused and looked around. Then came another cry, as if to announce that it was here. I walked along the sound like I was possessed. It was then just around the left corner of the building. A glimpse of the dark pink feather shone through the open windows. I approached that way when I saw myself getting closer. The bird in the cage flapped its wings as if it was glad to see me. It was Derek's office. So it was you. Even in the dark the bird's jewels glowed brilliantly with a 5-color glow. I leaned slowly down on the window frame. On my close face a bird came down from the torch and walked waddling along. Then he pecked the cock metal bars into his beak and pushed his head in. It was like a sign to be stroked. I hesitated as I tried to bring my fingers reflexively. What if I get bitten when I try to pet it? However, he fell with his beak as a bird urged and pushed his head in. The colorful dark pink hair collar sticking out through the bars was a bit funny. I eventually smiled a little and gently stroked the bird's head with my index finger. The bird sounded different from before, as if it were in a good mood. Pudic. The wings were fluttered once again. Isn't it frustrating? I hadn't thought of anything until just now, but words popped out without my knowledge. A dark pink bird that looks just like my hair. He's an expensive body with a fancy appearance more than anyone else. But in fact he's stuck in a cage and can't do anything. Sometimes it's the kind of attention that passers-by throws at me, and it's kind of happy to live on. Actually, I feel stuffy. I'm out of breath every second. It didn't look much different from me trapped in this fucking game. I thought it wouldn't matter because it would be over if I get out of here. As if to answer my words, the bird cried straight away. I smiled faintly at the sight. Then I raised my hands to bury my face. A broken smile came out of my mouth. When I was alone on the terrace after the crown prince left, it was a self-help that did not allow me to speak out. I knew better than anyone else that it was a game, but I felt so stupid and pathetic that I expected something and I was disappointed. Only after I hid my 2 hands so that no one could see, I slowly opened my face. I lied to myself that it was just a game every time and I didn't care about it because it was over when I escaped. But in fact I've never been indifferent. I was scared, afraid, and cried every minute. I thought there would be no more hell than when I lived in that house. There was not a single thing I could do at my disposal here. Starting with food, clothing, and shelter, I had to agonize over even a simple word. It's a game here. You're possessed by a bad girl with the worst reputation. I already knew it well enough, but why? But why did I realize that it was only a few days before my escape? The first man in my life to have a crush on me. Why is he the ML in the game who will turn around when a normal mode hostess appears? I am an emotional person, so I couldn't pass this whole thing off without a hitch. So I'm calculating like a villain, and it was more and more difficult to stop me from squeezing. When the sound of laughing at myself seems to be more and more like a groan of tears. Suddenly I thought I was so tired and exhausted. Perhaps it was strange for me who didn't say anything. With my face buried in my hands, the bird tapped the bars of the spear a couple of times with its beak. It was the moment master, a familiar voice, suddenly called me. I slowly lifted the buried face in my hands. Eclipse, it wasn't a hallucination in the dark. The dark red favorability gauge bar sparkled a few miles away. The ML was staring at me. Surprised by the unexpected encounter, the gray eyes were slightly larger. He moved his steps when he saw me with my head up as I stared at him approach me at a constant speed. I felt my hand on the cheek. There was no water on it. Was a relief. At the same time, Eclipse stood tall before me. Are you coming back from the swordsmanship class now? I wasn't in the mood to laugh at all, but I worked hard and made a smile around my mouth. Eclipse stared at me with an uncertain eye and soon nodded slowly. You're very late. I didn't know the time, but it was a rough patch. In fact, there was no spirit in the thought that I might have caught up with the appearance that no one was able to see. Eclipse slowly opened his mouth. What are you doing here? Just, I replied with a shrug, as if nothing was wrong. I was watching birds. In my words, the gaze of Eclipse slipped to the cage next to it. For a moment, the gray eyes that stayed in the dark pink bird in the cage came back to me again. Did you go out of the palace? He looked strange in my appearance. I belatedly closed my eyes and nodded, breaking the fact that I was wearing full makeup on a banquet dress. Oh yes, there was a banquet in the palace today. There was no mention of banquets relating to the crown prince. It would make you feel dirty if anyone listened to the story of the main culprit who killed his home country. However, due to the immediate reaction, the consideration became useless. The crown prince's birthday banquet? Did you know that? My teacher also participated. Really, I was so surprised that I only blinked. So there's no class today. As soon as the question passed through my mind, Eclipse asked suddenly, by the way, why did you come back to young master's hall? I felt a little nausea. I see, it must be visible to others that I came back alone secretly. There's no way you didn't know. If the real owners had come back, the mansion wouldn't be so quiet. But I didn't have to tell Eclipse this trivial story. I just laughed silently and vaguely, but at that moment, Eclipse's eyes flinched. Why are you laughing like that? His face was as dull as usual as a wax figure. So I couldn't immediately understand what he was saying. Did they make you sad again? What, the Duke and other nobles? His subsequent words left me blank. Eclipse is one step closer to me. His face, immersed in a dark shadow, was revealed in the bright moonlight. You always had that look on your face whenever you came here after what those bastards did. His face again was horrendous. I looked at him with astonishment at the violent words and deeds I had heard for the first time from him. But for a moment I was mute. Who else is this? The young Duke the second one, or Eckhart? Eclipse? The ensuing verbal abuse stopped him in a hurry. It's not like that. I'm fine. Nothing happened. Nothing really happened. I was just a little tired when I saw a bird trapped in a cage, that's all. But he didn't believe what I'm saying. Eclipse's eyes were blurred. I've seen and heard, Master. What are you? I know that the reason you brought me from the auction house is related to the Master's situation. Fortunately, this remark was not surprising. I already knew that Eclipse knew my position in the duchy. Instead of being surprised, however, this time worries came. I'm afraid that the fake princess situation will affect his favorability again. I wonder if that's why he's angry at me for looking so pitiful. Because of my position. Who's bothering you again? That's a careful question. Eclipse clenched his fist in a hurry. After a big breath, he answered with a clear voice. That hasn't happened since then. It's not like that. I'm asking why you're standing alone in front of the bird. What do you mean? Who bothered you? And why are you standing alone? It didn't feel like the same question at all, but I soon accepted it. It's because I suddenly remembered how my appearance had just reflected on him. I had my face buried in my hands in front of a bird and burst into groan, so it might look like a pitiful sight. Did you rather buy sympathy? I wondered if one of the puppies that Eclipse said was bothering him, and his heart was gone. I answered with a more relaxed voice. It was because the bird was pretty, so I watched it for a while and I was tired. It was a bit embarrassing to see it, but it wasn't an entirely unacceptable excuse. But Eclipse just looked at me with an unknown expression. Then a long time later he asked something out of the blue. Are you happy now? What, are you happier than before I came to the Duke's residence? I blinked at my command. I couldn't understand why he suddenly said that. Did you get any unhappier after you came to the Duke's residence? No, that can't be true. Eclipse shook his head. That can't be true, Master. Then why would you ask that? Just, I want to know, how was my master? With no fixed eyes on me, he urged the answer. I felt a sense of bewilderment while I answered him vaguely. Are you happy? It was close. I don't know when I think about how I felt after I came here. I thought that it was more about misfortune than happiness. But is it enough to be entirely unhappy? It wasn't that again. As long as there was a way out, this was nothing. I am not the kind of person who is always asleep in misfortune and frustration. Look. Even though I just felt deeply fatigued, but I was smiling under a mask. I've never really thought about it, so I don't know how do I look. I shrugged calmly as usual. However, I couldn't get rid of Eclipse's expression. My master, sometimes you seem to be okay, but you seem to be more unhappy than anyone else. Really, and sometimes it looks like you're going to disappear somewhere. I got goosebumps at his following words. Did he notice that I would disappear? I thought I had never made such an expression, but he doesn't know how good he is. Maybe he sensed something in secret. I opened my mouth. My heart was pounding. I hurriedly said, "You've seen the wrong thing, Eclipse. Where am I going to leave you? I'm fine. I'm just a little tired, so don't worry too much." I emphasized that nothing had happened to me so that he could rest assured. Until I escape, I must not instill any anxiety in him. Get out of here with me, master. But what I heard was more shocking than when he was angry for no reason. What did you say? Run away with me, Eclipse. There are slaves who are planning to defect to another country. We plan to smuggle through the Delmen who are working on the port side in a few days. So I'm gonna get in between them and say, come with me out of the Empire, master. I was so embarrassed that I lost my words. I thought he was just helping his countrymen who were worse off than he was. But I didn't know he were planning this great thing. Whenever I heard the report that he was returning home late, the anxiety that had caused me to wrap my chest turned out to be a reality. Did you try to do the same? While I was just poking my lips because I didn't know what to say, a terrible sense of betrayal suddenly rose to my throat. You lied to me. You tried to go to another country too. Oh no, master. He shook his head with round eyes at my pressing voice. It's not like that. I didn't mean to do that. Then why would you say that to me, Eclipse? I'm sorry, I've misunderstood that you want to do that. His words struck me dumb. It was absurd that he had been making such a wild guess at me. In the meantime, I couldn't stop my head from spinning. Eclipse and I run away alone, raise the remaining favorability, and escape. I don't know if there's really this route in hard mode, but it wasn't a bad way. Realistically speaking, however, escape was subject to numerous restrictions. About 2 weeks now, his favorability was close to 96%. Calling him in comfortably from the mansion as before, and to make a desperate move to the harbor to avoid the countless number of soldiers following him. If I choose the latter, I can certainly improve the favorability of Eclipse, but I cannot guarantee the favorability of other ML. In particular, Derek, who was worried that Reynold and the Duke, who seemed to have finally opened their hearts to me now, would get caught up in the station. If their favorability dropped, 96% of them were useless, and at a glance in the brilliant golden light passing by my mind, I shook my head hurriedly to shake off my thoughts. Eclipse, I, who had come to a conclusion, made eye contact with Eclipse, who was still staring at me. You can't just go around and say things like that, even if you stand before me, master. I am the noblewoman of the Empire, and the only princess of this country before I was your master. Eclipse's mouth was stiff. He couldn't say a word at the end. I could see his eyes gradually turning into disappointment. But I couldn't do much with only 4% left. I didn't want to take the risk. I can take your convenience because I'm here. I can't take that award. Don't cross the line. Eclipse replied in a tight voice to my rather sober words. A place where even a servant looks down on you and ignores you. Eclipse, a noblewoman, returns alone from the banquet hall without a single escort. His jaw has become so hard that it stands out. He really felt sorry for my situation, and seemed to have the authority to run away. I was a little surprised that he felt so sorry for me, but I felt appalled that it was all due to favorability. If I escape, I'll be in possession of a normal mode hostess anyway, but when hard mode is over and normal mode starts, what happens to ML's memory and favorability towards Penelope? Is it all reset to the set value? That thought suddenly crossed my mind. I never broke the end of hard mode, so I didn't know what would happen after that, and what the contents of hidden ending were. Of course, it was none of my business what would happen after I went back to my present life, but it was when I was in deep thought looking at the vivid dark red color gauge bar above the head of Eclipse. Take me with you. Suddenly Eclipse's words cut off the idea. I'm all back to reality. Is it because I'm a slave, so I can't get into the palace? It was a carriage ride with my family today, so I couldn't do much. Family. Eclipse's eyes wiggled finally in my excuse. How can they be the master's family? Stop! I kept blocking Eclipse from going too far. Calm down. I reached out one hand to him, who was trying to refute again. Warm warmth touched my palms. I don't know what made you so excited, but neither in the carriage nor the palace. Nothing happened. I gently stroked his cheek to soothe the excited Eclipse like a cute puppy. Eclipse quickly relaxed his body and leaned his face on the palm of my hand. Your hands are cold because I've been out for a long time. When you came back, you didn't even ride a carriage. That's. I was embarrassed because I knew why my hands were cold, but I immediately caught my voice. It's not a big deal. I said I'd take a walk, so don't worry about it. Then you shouldn't have bought me, master. You shouldn't have made me care. Eclipse. You shouldn't have made me your one and only knight. Eclipse, who had been rubbing his cheek thickly in my hand, slowly turned his head. Soon it was not soft skin but moist and dry. It's already late. Hissing my palms, Eclipse kept his eyes from me. The tickling sensation of my palms made me forget how to breathe a little while. I'd been in contact with Eclipse many times before. But has he ever so openly expressed his affection for me? Never. I'd been begging him to come often, but never once did he reach out to me first. Staring at him with astonished eyes, I slowly breathed out a sigh. It was sudden, but not surprising. 96% is enough. Even in the normal mode, I nodded, thinking of the late meeting and skinned ship due to identity restrictions. Suddenly it stung near my cheek. When I looked up, the tip of my finger was a little prickly with a blind look still nailed to me. A chilling sensation flowed through my spine. I laughed awkwardly, trying not to express the queer feeling. Are you blaming me now? You're so rude. It's not about my unhappiness or mood that matters to you. Eclipse, who was still burying his lips in my palm, turned his head back long after. Then focus on what you have to do now. What do I have to do? Yes, you're my only knight. As you say, you have to be stronger than anyone else and protect me. You're the only one for me. Eclipse. At that moment I had the illusion that I was suddenly stuck in his gray pupil and disappeared. He slowly raised his arm and covered my hand on his cheek. Hot heat was felt over the back of my cool hand. I gave him orders with all my might. I didn't mean it, but somehow a desperate voice popped out. Stay by my side until I escape. Don't think about asylum, just stay still. You're gonna do that for me, right? Eclipse whispered at my urging. I don't know what you're thinking, but I don't want you to be sad about the people who are bothering you anymore. I'm fine. I'll try to make sure you're really okay. As I swore many times, my heart gradually subsided after my whispering voice. Yes, the ML wouldn't leave me behind. I was relieved, and the blinking dark red-colored favorability that looked at me. I made a choice. System subtract 14 million gold to check the favorability of Eclipse's remaining funds. 28 million gold. I was scared by the shrinking remaining funds, but it was snap favorability 98%, Eclipse 2%. Finally, my throat was suddenly choked up. I spoke with difficulty. Is there anything else you want to say to me? Then I could feel the strong force of pressing a finger on his cheek. He darted his lips and hesitated for a moment, and said in a familiar and sure voice, I'll make that happen, master. It wasn't the answer I wanted. I managed to contain the disappointment and nervousness that was creeping up. It's because it's not 100% full yet. A little over a week until the coming of age ceremony. If I try a little more in it, I will be able to win the remaining 2% and the confession that he loved me. At the time of the thought, staring blankly at the letter above his head, which has been changed back to check the favorability. I'll do that for you, Eclipse murmured to himself again. The next day the Duke accepted my excuse that I was unexpectedly ill and left the banquet hall first. It seemed like Penelope had already done it so frequently. But tell me, you are going forward and go chasing. How long will you be so childish with your coming-of-age ceremony just around the corner? But the nagging full of disapproval was inevitable. I'd been looking for Eclipse as often as I could since that day. However, it was difficult to raise the favorability of the remaining 2%. Maybe it's at the end. Sometimes I gave him the gift, sometimes I put honey on my tongue and whispered pleasant words. Even though I gently touched and stroked himself to check his favorability, he only looked at me with his darkened eyes. In addition, daily classes interrupted our meeting. It was a swordsman teacher that I gave him for my favorability. But it was getting on my nerves. Shall we skip class today and hang out together one day? I decided and begged with a sweet voice. However, I immediately changed my words, saying it was a joke, with a perplexing look and a blinking favorability. Eclipse, who was very contemplative and said that it didn't matter came to consider a new swordsmanship so important. It was the original track of the game's story when I went to visit him with such a spirit. I finally got the favorability 99% and the ceremony was only 6 days left. As time went on and it didn't go up to 100%, it was increasingly difficult for me to hide my anxiety. How can I induce him to say I love you even if he has 100% of favorability? I'm like a throbbing. I held onto my sick head and fell into deep anguish. There was no need to worry about this in normal mode. When the time came, he went over to the confession route. Even if 100% was not completely filled, the white gauge bar turned dark pink, signaling that it was ready to confess. That's right, come to think of it, there was something like that. I thought of a setup that I had forgotten because I was in a hurry to fill in my favorability. The color of the favorability gauge bar I did as the confession route progressed. The favorability gauge bar in normal mode temporarily changed color. It wasn't like the hard mode I'm experiencing now, but is it that important? I haven't really cared much about the color of the gauge bar so far, because the affinity directly related to life was much more important. But now, with the ending of the Eclipse route, the black red floating on his head has become a passion. No way, the dark red color doesn't means death out of revenge for the Empire, right? I shook my head, saying naughty, and uttered a terrible thought. If so, 99% of the favorability is not explained 1%. How the hell do I raise it? Do I have to push my lips in like that man? It was when I was biting my lips without knowing it, and was rolling my head insanely. Knock, my lady, this is Fennel. The butler's visit awakened me. I was a little surprised by the rather late visit, which was quite past dinner time. Come in. As soon as I let him in, the door opened and the butler stepped inside. After he politely greeted, he immediately revealed his reason for visiting. My lady, the Duke told me to have a light breakfast together tomorrow morning. Breakfast, yes, he says. Dinner will be difficult because of the recent delay in his exit due to the aristocratic meeting. I was puzzled by the sudden news and I nodded my head at the additional words. I see. Of course, I'll get it right. Tell him I'll get up early and get ready. Yes, my lady. Well then, good work. Oh, and even after he said what he had to say, the butler hesitated. There's another letter from the Imperial Palace, my lady. The hand which was trying to turn the pages of the book carelessly. Is it a banquet invitation? No, this time he delivered it directly through a servant working at the Crown Prince's palace. Burn it, I answered without a single thought. And I'm not feeling well, so just as I'm recuperating. Yes, my lady, the butler replied hesitatingly. The short interval to the answer suddenly felt suffocating. I ended up covering up the book I was trying to read roughly and making it annoying. That's what the butler does. Without asking, the butler bowed deeply and left the room as if he had noticed my watery temper. It was early the next morning. I got up early and headed for the dining hall as I promised the butler the day before. Even though I was half asleep, my mind was busy. After breakfast I saw the Duke off, and it was pretty hard to meet Eclipse just before class, but we arrived at the dining room before I finished my plans. It's your first time since the renovation, my lady. The butler who came to pick me up explained me he was right. Originally I only played in my room and ate rice with on my own, but I had never been near the dining room due to repair work. You can look forward to it. With a word of significance, the butler soon opened the dining room's door. And the open space, I don't know what the hell it was about, but it was completely different. Oh, it was amazingly colorful and extravagant, the row of gold and flowers arranged from place to place. At first glance it was dizzy and hectic, but if you looked closely it was more harmonious than you thought. He seemed to have paid considerable attention to the design. While looking through the interior of a strange place, I suddenly saw a flower that stood out of nowhere. It was the flower that decorated the interior of the dining room the most. What attractive rose vines! That's a voracious fleshy rose vine, the Ellenwick rose. The other day I had a luncheon in the greenhouse because of the renovation. The Duke answered to my interest for this plant that had roughly surrounded to avoid the quarrel of Reynold. Come to think of it, then, I thought it was the first time when the Duke talked to me for no particular purpose or reason. I guess he just liked that flower, I thought with an effort of cynicism, desperately pressing down on the insides because of nausea. Excessive meaning was bound to bring about a backlash. Fortunately, I couldn't think of the nightmare of starving with food in front of me. Perhaps because the inside was completely changed, unlike earlier one made of oak wood, the luxurious marble table had already been seated. The Duke sitting at the top of the ladder greeted, "You're here, good morning father brother, good morning frozen to death. Don't you go early?" "Yeah, guy with his pink hair got into a fight for being only a few minutes late." "Stop it, Reynold, there's nothing wrong with that. My father always tells me something." The Duke's eyes were on me and the mouth was closed because of fear. Derek just stared at me silently with his usual expressionless face. I'd been through it a few times and now I was quite used to it, so I was not impressed by the neglect of greetings. Let's do it, except for the early morning hours. It was an unusual breakfast. There was only occasional clatter of tableware in the luxurious and quiet dining room. "Now a few days later it's your birthday, Penelope." At the middle of the breakfast the Duke suddenly spoke. I replied with a smile, even though it was a subject that made me sick. "Yes, it's already done. Are you getting ready for the ceremony?" "What can I do? The butler and the maid are preparing instead me." I really didn't do anything. All I could do was get a massage from the maids every day during the bath to make the best skin and body shape. As I got used to it, I tried to ignore it. "Is there anything you want for the coming-of-age ceremony?" Then suddenly the Duke asked. I answered without long thought. Well, not really. It had already been after a grand arrangement of dresses and accessories for the coming-of-age ceremony. What I really wanted was something the Duke couldn't give. "Hey, don't bounce, tell me what you want, we'll buy it as usual." There was a sarcastic look as if Reynold had been waiting for it. "Weren't you so jealous of my dad for getting me a magic yacht at my coming-of-age ceremony? It wasn't such a bad thing to have a bath with maids every day. There were so many funny stories to pick up. You bragged about it, and you dragged it in the Altas River and you couldn't drive it properly, and it was overturned." At a smile on my face, his face turned red in an instant as I said everything I heard a while ago. "Who said that?" "It was just an accident, you pathetic bastard." "Why are you laughing, father?" "Oh no," Reynold shouted hurriedly to the Duke, but it didn't mean anything. I leaned toward the Duke, taking advantage of that he wasn't in the fuss. "It was just," and whispered quietly, "Early morning, can you come and say hello?" "Yes." Something out of the blue. Looking at the Duke, I slowly opened the mouth. "Say goodbye to your immature little daughter." "What are you talking about, Penelope? Say goodbye. I'm becoming a decent adult now. I want to forget about my shameful past and become a mature person after the coming-of-age ceremony." I ended my speech calmly, hiding the words "last farewell" with his daughter, who mimicked that maturity. "When did you ever?" The Duke's blue eyes, which looked at me with unfamiliar eyes, slowly became warm. "Yes. I'll make sure I would say hello in the morning." The Duke has repeatedly promised. This lie was pretty bitter and hard. It was time to barely turn away from the ticklish feeling with an awkward smile. Suddenly the dining room's door opened, so the butler stepped in with a hasty gesture. He reached the top of the table where the Duke sat. "Master, I think you should come out to the front door for a moment." The old butler's face was not as good as ever. The Duke showed signs of discomfort. "We all haven't been eating together in our family for a while, butler. If it's not urgent, let's talk again another time." It was with an embarrassed face, and soon the butler bent down and put his mouth in the Duke's ear. The Duke's face, which had expressed displeasure with the interruption of his meal, became harder and harder. Finally the butler, who had finished speaking, pulled up his upper body. At that moment the Duke sprang up from his seat. The wind made the chair pulled back, but he hurried out of the dining room without hitting it at all. The butler hurried after him. Derek and Reynold, as well as I, were just blinking their eyes without knowing what to say. Then Derek rose from his seat, pushing the chair. "I've got to go out," he said, and left the dining room without hesitation. "Oh man, what was that while eating?" Reynold muttered nervously. "The Crown Prince didn't come here again just because I ignored the letter, did he?" A terrible assumption suddenly came to mind. It was a story that a madman could have done. If so, the Duke, who had been beaten once, deserved to run like that. "Crazy, it hurts. What the hell is wrong with you?" As I frowned and got fed up, Reynold glanced at me with a strange look. "Hey, what are you doing? Let's see what is going on. Get up here." Reynold rose from his seat and urged me to go out with him. I answered with a puzzled look. I didn't really want to go. My head already ached at the thought of going to see the prince again and settling it. I followed after Reynold, leaving the dining room. It was around the time of passing the long corridor and seeing the central stairway in hall. The front door of the mansion was wide open. As the butler said there was a problem between them, stood a stampede. It was a tall man. Through the wide open large doors there was a cool outside smell of early morning air. "Aren't you going to catch people?" I walked fast, still crumpled my forehead, just past the drawing room. The Duke and butler, Derek and Reynold standing stiff instead of the golden hair I expected. I opened my eyes wide. Eclipse, the man standing in front of the front door of the mansion, was none other than my capture target. At my call he glanced at me, the gray eyes which had always been dull raised wide opened. Why here at this hour? My heart suddenly fluttered for no reason, the mysterious anxiety that I felt a day before my mother died. As if it flees through with its whole body like a thunder. What, there was a little person bouncing out of the back of that Eclipse's father. Brother's lovely pink hair that looked just like Reynold, blue pupils that were indisputably vivid in the veins of Eckhart. I'm Ivonne. That day early in the morning the coming-of-age ceremony was still 5 days away. As if there was a lag, the accident stopped. I stared blankly at the tiny figure of a woman who popped out from behind Eclipse without even blinking. There was a gauze on one side of the woman's forehead like the white lady who was injured by the magic I casted last time in the basement of Soleil Island. You're lying, aren't you? It was none of my business whether the leader of Layla's remnant was the princess. The only thing that matters is that it wasn't the coming-of-age ceremony yet. There were still 5 days left. Why? I looked away from Yvonne and looked back at Eclipse. He had been staring at me from the start with an expressionless face. It's as if he's waiting to see how I'm going to react. Until a few days ago he said he would stay by my side whatever happened, and will not give up on me. You said you don't want me to sad anymore, and you will try to make myself happy. But why the hell? Why just why? Only one question occupied my mind. As I managed to catch my increasingly rough breath, a stifling silence fell. When the Duke, who doesn't bring up a word, turns her lovely face into tears. Reynold, Penelope. The Duke broke the stillness, and opened his mouth heavily. You two should go back to your room, father. Reynold reacted before me, however he remained silent on the Duke's warning. I could hear him groan at me, who didn't budge from my place ever after the order, but I couldn't give a response. It seemed like a bomb has dropped this early in the morning, as everyone seemed in a state of confusion. Even though I didn't go back, the Duke turned to Yvonne, and you or I clearly saw that moment. The face of Eckhart, who is always cool, is now distorted by bitter longing and sorrow. Follow me for a moment, said the Duke, with all his reasons. So far countless people have deceived their appearances. You have to go through some tests to prove that you're really my daughter. A test? The Duke's blue eyes shook. The girl was more pitiful and pure than anyone else. Naturally, in the game the heroine passed all of the tests. She guessed all of the dead Duchess's goods, such as the structure and doubt of the mansion. It was a divine feature. It's hard to know all that if you were not involved with the concerned person. So far no one has ever passed the princess position. If it is found to be wrong, it could result in the death penalty for the contempt of the nobility. Warned the Duke in a stern tone. What are you going to do now? Will you follow me? I didn't recover my memory entirely, but I still remember, even though it's not the coming-of-age day. I'll try, nodded Yvonne with a determined look. Everything goes as in the game. I felt like I was suffocating. The Duke, who managed to turn his head, ordered Derek. Yes, father, hold him underground. I'll have to question him of what happened. Derek went straight to Eclipse. Wait, strangely enough I tried to stop the Duke in a hurry. But Yvonne was one step ahead of me. I'll take the test, so don't do that. Eclipse is the one who helped me. Appealed Yvonne to the Duke pitifully. The Duke shook his head firmly. That's not under your jurisdiction. He's an apprentice to our family. Well, but it would be impossible to go out without clear permission. Find out how this child got it. Derek and I were embarrassed by the Duke's orders. Don't drag him away. When Yvonne shut up, I stepped forward. It's my escort, so he's my subject. Penelope. The Duke and Derek suddenly looked surprised as they turned. They didn't seem to realize I was still here. I need to talk to him. My head was spinning, but right now I had to ask Penelope. I walked towards Eclipse in a haste. No one stroke, and the hostess standing next to him watched me with such strange eyes. I suddenly stretched out my arms, not caring about such a thing. Then I grabbed his jacket as if I were holding back his flesh and blood. It was the moment. System, would you like to check Eclipse's favorability? 18 million gold. Fame 400. I hit 18 million gold straight away. But system, insufficient funds. Reserved funds 12 million golds. The white writing changed right away. I managed to keep my head above water and chose fame 400 again. System, lacking fame. Loyalty total 360. I knew I used all the money I had left to check his favorability without hesitation. I am confident that I will be able to get 100% soon. Moreover, I believed it wouldn't matter because I received news from the butler that the sale of the magic-processed emerald had begun. But had I known that stupid judgment would come back like this when I had no choice but to blow the window of the system that was in front of me, violent feelings of throwing something rose up. The hand holding Eclipse's collar that was shaking wasn't visible for the naked eye. It was trembling to an extent that would shiver the order of things. Penelope, stop and back down, warned me the Duke for a second time. When I came to my senses I looked down, and saw his eyes under the jet light. He was a bit surprised and his eyes grew bigger. Master, just why? I had no choice but to ask like a fool. Among everyone, why did you have to betray me and bring the Rio princess? Why? So I repeated that word only. My face in Eclipse's pupils was horribly distorted. He looked down at me senselessly, and soon opened his mouth. I am a slave from a defeated country, but I am indebted to the Eckhart family. I knew the family was looking for her, so I couldn't turn away. Ha ha ha. In the reply of Eclipse, who spoke as if he made a brilliant deed, a brave laugh came out. There was a flood of acid going back into my esophagus. I felt keenly what the experience of flipping my eyes was like. Don't fuck me, you crazy bitch. The sound of clenched teeth leaked out. The grace you wear must come from me, not from the Eckhart family. I was the one who bought you from that Fuchsing auction. I knew it was stupid, but even though he knew it, I couldn't stop the screaming. The hand was lifted above the stroke. Just before I put his cheek up, Penelope, the Duke thunderstruck. Butler, take him away. No, I still have something to say. Penelope, Eckhart. This time Derek called me as cool as ice. Don't you understand what father say? I just asked my escort how. You're not a child anymore. How long do I have to watch you do evil? I was fed up with his eyes. I was fed up with the princess too, that was standing still as if she, a real princess, appeared and looked at a fake princess who is evil and rotten to the core with jealousy. It wasn't just them, there was the Duke, Reynold, Butler, and the people who came to see the commotion. I looked around at them one by one with a look of fear. Dark red, orange, light pink, Eclipse's favorability gauge bar was glistening. Lady, please leave, called the butler at me in a heavy voice. My hand went all the way up down to hit Eclipse. In the midst of all this I was worried about the falling popularity. The power of the hand that had held all that weight I loosened. I still clenched my teeth and slowly turned my back against Eclipse. As soon as I was forced to follow the butler's footsteps. It's a bloody atmosphere and I don't know what to do. I made eye contact with someone who was stamping his feet. The woman's face was distorted with apologies and guilt, a princess in the usual gentle and good in normal mode, and a fake princess in hard mode who's wary of her appearance and behavior. Somehow the same game is going on, and the creepiness suddenly eroded the tip of the jawline. Coming back to the room under the watch of the butler, I went straight to my desk and sat down. Maybe she heard the news, but Emily, who was waiting, followed me carefully. Miss, get out, but brown eyes full of freckles rolling over her face was like a crab. Maybe the shrewd girl regretted siding with me. And maybe she's willing to tell the real princess who's back somehow that she's quitting being my personal maid. Can't you hear me? I have something to think about, so get out, Emily. I shouted nervously. Yes, I'll be waiting outside. Call me if you ever need me, miss, she answered in a fit of surprise and hurried out of the room. Soon enough the room became so desolate that one could hear the sound of an ant passing by. I got a throbbing pain, aching head, deep sighs, and buried my face in my hands. It's still only morning, the beginning of the day, and I'm as tired and exhausted as I've been through the night for days. But even feeling such feelings was a luxury. Think you can't die like this. I held on to the spirit of weakness and forced my face out of my hands. Then I stared into the air and held my head high for some reasons that I don't know. Eclipse betrayed me and came to Yvonne. I didn't want to escape like this and be swept into normal mode, become a villain woman, and die miserably. However, I couldn't remain discouraged forever. Fortunately, the game did not show up at the coming-of-age ceremony. I still have 5 days left, which means I still have another chance to escape. 99%. I just need to say I love you after 100%. Whether or not a woman appears, that's all you have to do. I need to see the bastard. I stared nervously into the thin air and waited for the shim gate to end. I also wondered where to get the money to check his good feelings and excuses for his teachers who secretly gave him to the Duke. How long has it been since I started to wait? Knock knock lady, this is Pennell. At last the news came to the door. Come in, butler, I ordered hastily. The butler soon came in to tell the news. Lady, the first emerald necklace you put up at last night's auction has now an owner. The proceeds were just transferred to the mansion through the White Rabbit platform. The money has been deposited? Yes, okay, although I didn't know the news about Eclipse, but still it was the news of the meeting in the midst of this situation. Right now I jumped out of bed when I heard the safe was filled. There was a faint hope in my heart. I have to make him say I love you confession right away after I check his favorability, whether by putting honey on my tongue, coaxing him, or forcing him. It was the moment when I was rushing out of my desk. My lady, wait a minute. The butler hurriedly blocked my way with a troubled look. Here is a list of men I'd like to introduce to you. What who? I frowned at the sudden news. The butler moved slowly. Come in, gentlemen, and then in the room that was still open, 2 first-class knights in armor came in. They are the new escorts assigned to you, my lady. Sir Philip and Sir Ed. Hello, my lady, nice to meet you. Please take good care of us, my lady. Sir Philip and Sir Ed are members of the Duke's Guard. They are the most skilled in swordsmanship. Butler, I called the butler in a cool voice, ignoring the men's polite greetings. What are you doing now in my room? The butler hesitated for a moment with an embarrassed face, and then managed to open his mouth. For now you have been given the order to keep out of touch with outsiders, even members of the family. That includes Eclipse. What? Suddenly my vision blurred, and all I could see was darkness filling me up. My rage's red flames that had barely subdued rose to my throat. I clenched my teeth and asked back. Why me? It's simply to keep Miss safe until the interrogation is complete. Safe? Yes, isn't this imprisonment, or surveillance? It wasn't intended, but my mouth twisted into a smirk, looking at me smile like a real evil woman. They couldn't make eye contact with the lady of the house. That's absolutely not. It can't be, my lady. Then convince me why I can't even meet my escort, and why I have to replace him with new ones. Young Duke personally led the knights himself to Prebu. I opened my eyes wide at the butler's words. Prebu was the name of a village outside the capital where Eclipse's teacher lives. Why, the guest who came today, I mean Yvonne, was severely injured by a monster that appeared a few days ago. That it was said that it wasn't because of monster, but I managed to swallow his words. It didn't matter now whether Yvonne really was the leader of an evil group, so I tried to keep my cool and urged him to continue. And the slaves over there took care of the injured guest, but all the slaves were all from Delman. Wasn't that news that the butler already knew? It was a fact that I did not know at the time that I had found the right teacher for Eclipse. Because the farm where slaves work was located in a remote place quite far from this village. But when Eclipse happened to suddenly recognize an acquaintance from his homeland, he suddenly found a farm. And it had to be the day he came late into the mansion to defeat the monster that suddenly hit the farm. And I was the one who asked the butler to deliver the herbs to those slaves in covert. And it was an implicit secret between the butler and me, so that's when they met. Naturally, the first meeting between Eclipse and Yvonne was drawn. Damn it. I swallowed the curse and bit my lower lip to the point where blood would seep. Why didn't I think more seriously when I heard that the monster had appeared? I felt a bitter regret, but it already happened. At that time I had been blinded by the favorability, which was close to 96%. By the way, can other male leads other than Eclipse take Yvonne with them in hard mode? I tilted my head at the question that suddenly came to my mind. At some point, I started getting more and more displeased with the development of the game. By this point I was lost in thought. With a serious face I remembered the presence of these scavengers. You guys get out of here. The butler sent out the intruders who had entered my room without permission. When they left, the butler had a serious look on his face. I received the information that the Delmans are gathering and trying to escape, my lady. I opened my eyes wide. It was something I had heard from Eclipse a while ago, so young Duke wanted to make an emergency arrest. Wait, I raised my hand to stop the butler. Did that girl say that? No, these are all stories that came out of Eclipse's mouth while confessing during the interrogation, my lady. What, the herbs you confided me with to give them to Eclipse? He say it's their escape source. He said he was deeply hurt to see his fellow countrymen harmed by the sudden appearance of this monster. Therefore he decided to extend a generous hand to them. By the way, after knowing that my lady's care has been distorted, he has been trying to dissuade them, suffering for a long time alone, trying to hold them back. In the meantime he met the proclaimed princess, and decided to repay his services to the Duke. How the butler closed his mouth at my cold laugh. Crazy son of a bitch. I shuddered shallowly because of his subtlety. Not long ago, if he had been running away with them, he would sold them without hesitation. I had a vague idea why. Because I said I didn't want to go. That's what Eclipse was all about, hiding his inner being, his true self, and mimicking a loyal dog. But as his favorability rose sharply, I thought there was a change in his admiration for me, but I was mistaken. For him, his own safety came before his petty love for a hateful empire, and his worries about strangers among his fellow countrymen in front of me. I could see how much he would be willing to deceive me into pretending he was a good person who was worried about his fellow countrymen. What would be better? To stay in the dukedom, or help his fellow countrymen get out of the empire? And he chose. He took the people of the village as a sacrifice, dragging Yvonne, and stuck to this place. And he grabbed the opportunity to raise his status that I hadn't been able to do, to add the last sparkle on his masterpiece. He had to avoid any suspicion that he might be with the slaves of the defeated country. In order to do that, he cleverly intertwined me. I suppressed my intense feelings and asked, what did my father do? He sent young Duke himself to confirm the truth. The interrogation is it's still in progress. So until my first brother returns and the interrogation is over, I can't see either father nor Eclipse. The butler did not answer. It was a tacit affirmation. I sighed deeply and waved my hand. Okay, get out. Well, if you need anything, feel free to call me. The butler looked at me and bowed politely before leaving the room. It was a last notice of courtesy that would eventually disappear when Yvonne will pass the Duke's test. Son of a bitch, I was so irritated that I couldn't bear it, so I raised my hand ready to sweep off the desk and barely managed to hold it. I couldn't lose my mind over this. I had so much to think about, and more importantly, how to survive. It's just too much. I can't do this. I scrambled to get up and walk to my bed. I need a second best option. Lying in the midst of the bed, feeble and empty, I rolled my head around. The bed was going full throttle. In a flash I felt terribly miserable because I couldn't do anything, breathless, as if Hades came to take away my soul away. After starving for a day, I left my room early the next morning because if I stayed still, the fire would burn all over my body. Where are you going? I was blocked by the guards as soon as I opened the door. Move aside. We need you to tell us where you're going for your own safety. Can I even move in my own house? After answering nervously, I admitted that I had become too sensitive and struggled to reveal my destination. I'm going for a walk in greenhouse, then we'll follow you. No, don't follow me, but the Duke. If you move one step from here, I'm going to scream because you have insulted and abused me. My lady, their expressions froze and their complexions became ghastly, well aware that the Duke was pretty sensitive to some of the incidents I had deliberately raised. You are just mere escorts. You don't have to follow me around and keep watch on me, but princess, don't make a fuss. I'll be right back. They had no choice but to watch me walk out of the room like a ghost. Throughout my walk in the corridor, I felt like every person I encountered looked at me with strange eyes. I was exhausted even before I arrived at my destination. Suddenly this horrible thought crossed my mind. What if I never get out of this fucking game? Then it suddenly occurred to me that I might have to go through this tedious task until I die. My eyes dimmed. I felt much better now than when I was stuck in my room. As I kept walking, I took a big breath and laid back the thoughts and plans I had last night. But if it's underground, is it in the basement of the mansion? Then suddenly I wondered where Eclipse was trapped. I heard that the basement of the mansion is usually used for torturing criminals who have committed great felonies. But there was one more place near the mansion. It's a place where knights who commit wrongdoings are kept. Eclipse is an apprentice to the family anyway, so he'll be there. After making the decision, I headed towards the forest road to the maze. I didn't think I could meet him right away just because I was going there. However, if I stand still, I'm going to turn crazy, so my feet just took the lead before sending the signal to my brain. How long did I walk along the quiet forest path? Deep in thought, I didn't find anyone walking from the other side. Speak of the devil. Until someone found me, I let out a weak moan. Oh, hello, princess. It was awkward, but she still greeted me with a harmless, innocent, pure, and friendly face, calling me princess. Princess, give me a break. At the same time, I recalled when I was playing normal mode and greeted Penelope first. I swallowed a nasty curse. It was Yvonne. Soft, blue-colored eyes staring at me. It was hard to believe it was the same person who, in Soleil's basement, was sucking mercilessly children's spirit, draining their energy, making them shrink like a deflating balloon until they disappear. Goosebumps rose on the back of my neck. I stood there silent with a strange feeling of being stuck in my head. Princess, her voice called out carefully as she stared at me with her blue innocent eyes. I suddenly came to my senses. Hi. Reluctantly I opened my mouth and glanced around the main trail. There was only Yvonne and me on the quiet forest path. Shit. Originally I was going to ignore her at the mansion, however, since she's a member of Layla's clan, I was too scared to ignore her. Yes, hello. My low voice shook as the pupils of my eyes retracted shallowly. Did you accept my greeting? Yvonne, in normal mode, was easily moved and burst out in tears by the slightest trifle. I stared at her with an expressionless face and quickly lifted my lips. You're coming back from meeting Eclipse? Oh yes, I heard your test is not over yet. Yvonne frowned in embarrassment at my words. She hesitated for a moment, then answered, I took advantage of the lunch break and asked the Duke to look after Eclipse. After all, he's trapped because of me. I was a bit frustrated to think that I couldn't prevent them from meeting. It truly tried my patience. So Eclipse is trapped in a cellar, not in the basement of the mansion. It was unexpected. May I ask why you're alone without a maid? I asked back bluntly. Yvonne's cheeks flushed red when she answered, there was a maid, but she had to take care of a few things and I wanted to walk alone. This was a bit offensive. The exam was not over yet, and she had no maid. I guess she hated the fake princess from the beginning and put all the cogs in place so that she'll always be abused. For as long as I can remember, living in the mansion was so exhausting. Then I must accept this situation with my arms wide open and be happy with the appearance of the real princess. But I couldn't bring myself to do so. I held back a peal of twisted laughter that was about to be leaked out, and glared back at Yvonne's face. It must have hurt. Pardon the wound, I pointed out to the wound on her forehead covered with gauze. At this fine comment she grimaced slightly. I had nothing else to bring up apart from this observation. Well then, have a good day, lady. I stared at her for a moment, and immediately passed her without hesitation. To be precise, I was about to excuse me. She suddenly caught me by the wrist. I turned my head with a frown. What is it? Sorry, I'm sorry. Yvonne was looking up at me with her fist-sized tears hanging in her big protruding eyes. She looked so weak and pathetic, and she knew why Eclipse was did such a tribute. I was so stunned that I did nothing. What are you sorry about? My sudden arrival? You must have been surprised, princess. In a quivering voice she begged for an unrelenting misunderstanding. I shouldn't have come here, but Eclipse begged me to come with him at least once. I felt guilty because I thought I had hurt you unintentionally. I'm deeply sorry. Hey, I cut off Yvonne's in the middle of her increasingly frustrated voice. Did you tell him your name was Yvonne? She looked up at me with her round tearful eyes. Was Yvonne the name you were called when you were a commoner? Yes. How can she recall her name when she was living as a commoner with a memory loss? Even if it didn't make sense, I nodded my head to this absurdity. What you're here for has nothing to do with me. Yes, her blue pupils were inundated with surprise. I added, spelling my words clearly in case she might misunderstand. I'm fine, so don't bother. I'm telling you to treat me like a nobody. Understood? Well, it's if you understand, let me go. It didn't matter if she didn't understand. My wrist in her hand felt as cold as ice. I didn't know if it was due to my fear or her odd power as the leader of Layla. The hairs on my neck straightened, but I didn't show it, and retorted, clipping off my wrist. And I was a commoner too, so I understand your ignorance manners. So keep in mind that if you touch a noblewoman's body without permission, a correction will be inflicted on you. You'll be slapped. I wish you a pleasant walk. Goodbye. I turned my back on her in a hurry. Come to think of it, was quite funny when I was possessed by this crazy game. I remember feeling like running away every time I ran into male leads for fear of dying. But unlike the male leads who had let me run away with their petty pride, the hostess did not let me go easily. I swear I don't have any hidden purpose. The hem of my skirt became tense without saying much. Yvonne appealed with a cry that was full of beseech. I lost my memory when I was young. I vaguely remember anything, just snippets of flash here and there, and thanks to Eclipse's encouragement I came here. If I'm mistaken, if I'm not the real daughter, I'll be punished really. I sighed deeply and mumbled in my head. Then I turned around and approached her. Don't beg me for forgiveness. But princess, I told you it doesn't matter. When Yvonne saw me getting closer, she looked embarrassed and backed away. Then she stumbled, perhaps with a crooked stone. Even when falling down, Yvonne was so beautiful. I reached out my hand and held her arm to pull her towards me. In the middle of winter her body was barely balanced, so slender. The skin of her palm was appallingly cold, like a dead body. Be careful, thank you. Yvonne murmured the thanks. I managed to put up with what I wanted to do by shoving her, and pushing right away, and quickly moved on. Listen, Yvonne, what it's none of my business whether you're the lost daughter of the Duke, or came in because of something else. Princess, from now on whenever we meet be yourself and I'll be myself. How can you say that? Her eyes as wide as a rabbit that dimmed again. How could you say that? Who knows, maybe I'm the Duke's lost child, so we might be family. Family? I had a puzzled look on my face as if I just witnessed an accident. Then I strongly denied her illusion. I'm not your family, don't lie. I know you think so too. A family? No, it's just a temporary relationship that will end soon. I thought that was the end of today's dangerous events. Go on, you piqued my curiosity. Let's hear everything you have to say. When the interrupter burst in between us, I and Yvonne's head turned at the side of voice at the same time. Lovely pink hair, just like Yvonne, was walking out of the lush trees, the king of bad timing. I burst out some crazy laughter. As I was getting more and more nervous, the light pink gauge bar on his head blinked quickly. It seemed like the favorability was dropping. Are you seriously thinking that? Asked violently Reynold, who had come to where we stood. I defied his resentful gaze and asked with a sigh, what did I do? What did you do? His face wriggled abruptly. Strangely, it didn't feel very scary anymore. Do you have to be careful with the first child yesterday, not the family, or the temporary relationship? That's not wrong. What? Because the test isn't over yet. I'm not saying about situation right now. He shouted his frustration. I asked back with a reflexive frown, then what are you talking about? It's all to point out your demeanor. Penelope Eckhart. A shriek of gnashing teeth echoed through the tranquil forest. Yvonne breathed weakly beside me. I didn't like his nonchalant retort, but he pushed me to the limit. You've already been so grasping at a kid who's not even sure if she's real or fake? Dealing with a bug that is worse than a slave? I reflexively noticed where his gaze was lingering at the arm of the lady, which I didn't let go of yet. Who's treating others like real trash? As his words pierced my ears, that day came to mind vividly. You always make me miserable, as if I were worse than a slave. The last day of the festival in the attic. He was referring to my screams, which I had let out in response to my desperate situation. That little thing about not caring about each other. Why me? I believe that something might have changed every time I was beaten like that. After all that, like a fool. After all the trouble, when I laughed as if I had gone mad. Reynold flinched as well. He too hardened his face as if he thought I was mocking him. The favorability bar flashed again quickly. Is it -1% to 2%? It didn't matter if it plummeted by about 30%, as the favorable sentiment was not as close as before. I turned my head casually, thinking about how much my favorability had been reduced. Yvonne, you answer. Did I grab you like a rat? At that moment I was curious what Yvonne would answer. By the way, is it true the heroine's personality is the same as in easy mode? Looking at what's going on right now, it wouldn't be surprising if she answered. I grabbed myself and screamed. Here, Yvonne mumbled with tears in her eyes. She was about to open her mouth instead of Reynold, who couldn't see the whole situation. If you ask like that, she'll be oh no, young master. Yvonne shook her head in surprise and said, The princess is right. I was dumb and tripped with a rock and almost fell, so the princess caught me. What? Reynolds' whole face froze as if he heard something he couldn't believe. Then he looked down at Yvonne's arm, still caught by me, with a puzzled look. With the sudden appearance of Reynold, I had no time to let go, but I was purposely not letting go to listen to Yvonne's answer. I pulled Yvonne's arm up and pushed it toward Reynold and spread her fingers neatly in front of his eyes. Yvonne's arm dropped down weakly. Sadly, you haven't changed a bit since then. I shrugged and muttered to myself. At my words, Reynold's blue pupils began to shake as if it were an earthquake. Penelope, as soon as he called me, I turned and began to move quickly. The idea of going for a walk and exploring places where Eclipse might be was ruined. I was convinced by Yvonne's words anyway, and I didn't even want to pass by them. I quickly walked back to my room. Penelope, I heard a wild sound beating from the back, and soon my front was blocked. What? I thought you would comfort your crying sister. I frowned as I looked and said politely, Move. At that moment the guy Reynold was breathing heavily and his eyes were watering, and then, I'm sorry, I think I misunderstood. He admitted his mistake without a hitch. At the same time, the favorability gauge blinked above his head. Suddenly, Derek at the court of the Imperial Palace came to mind. An easy rise and easy fall in favor. Such a thing could not impress me. Okay, get out of the way. However, the atmosphere inside the mansion is uncertain. So if you're in an accident now, then as soon as I looked at him, who was making an excuse right after the apology, he shut his mouth. He was also embarrassed and his eyes were red. That's all you have to say? I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I nodded my head when I heard his apology. Soon I smiled. Okay, so that's it, right? Don't get upset and don't go in. Just take a walk. But I don't want it. I cut off the relieved man's words with a smile on my face. His face went blank. What? Yes, I don't want your apology. I repeated his words word by word. Stupid Penelope always apologized to Reynold first when they fought. I've never received an apology for any of the arguments and abusive language I've heard before. I didn't get an apology after I was possessed, where the title of fake princess, who was often neglected, originated from, was well known as it had. He didn't expect me to say that, so Reynold stammered for a while. However, his face soon turned red and then blue and a hideous energy leaked out. Do you feel better when you say such a rude thing after a person apologizes? Then do you have to be so upset even if you apologize? This is getting more, and you haven't accepted my apology every other time either. Why should I accept your apology as if it were obvious? What? There may be times when I don't want to accept your apology. I looked at him in a faint manner and said in a preaching tone, how can a person's heart be so consistent? Don't force me to apologize. Are you taking revenge on me for what I did before? Yes, I nodded to the man, who was so absent-minded that he was blowing his breath away. You should try it too. How miserable and dog-like it is to talk to someone who ignores you and treats you like nothing. In other words, from now on I was also saying that I would treat him like that too. Hey you, he understood and glared at me with a look of murder in his eyes. I checked the precarious blinking favorability gauge and glanced around me. There were no stones to hit me in the head, with no sharp branches that popped out. Of course it wouldn't be great if a man full of anger choked me. Fortunately, he hasn't made any moves yet, so it seems it hasn't dropped too much. Reynold, who had been staring at me for quite a while, nervously scratched his head as I tried to leave again. Hi, yes, I said, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. With an irritated sigh, he surprisingly apologized again. We're not kids, let's stop. How would this affect the Eckhart's reputation among the commoners? And he glanced at the spot where Yvonne was still standing and let out a small sigh. I thought that was just funny. Eckhart's reputation. I burst into laughter, as if I had heard something funny. You really don't know? Why have I been treated like that by a maid in charge? What? Why are you suddenly talking about that? It's because of you, Reynold. I stopped laughing and looked straight at him. What? Because you've just been acting this way in front of the commoners. Hey Penelope, what are you? You've been treating me like a bugger and ignoring me so naturally, as if you're breathing in front of people. This guy was also male lead, so I had been desperately controlling myself. Even though I was irritated and angry until the end of my limits, I took it into consideration when he softened his temper to a certain extent. I've never explicitly mentioned anything about abuse before. When he was pushed to the limit, he was trying to get rid of his guilt because of Necklace, but he sat on the sidelines as much as he could. I knew that I couldn't tolerate and cut down on the high degree of the Eckhart pride. It would have a huge impact on my favorability, but the situation was not good. The heroine who appeared before the coming-of-age ceremony, and the fear that I might not be able to return home, made me half insane. And it made me reveal all my feelings that I had been struggling to contain without knowing you. It's because of you, Reynold Eckhart. It was disgust itself, not words, that came out of my mouth. Reynold was surprised to see that I felt something as if it was bubbling over the dry voice. But what kind of reputation? Only then did I lose my strength from the glaring eyes at him. Don't talk to me for the time being. Penelope, please, if you're really sorry, please do it for me. Please, brother, have a nice day. With a stiff smile, I greeted him as kindly as I could, as if I had never hinted at any disgust, and quickly got out of that stifling place, leaving him behind with a horribly distorted face. The moment I passed by him, the smile I was building near my mouth faded away like a lie, and a look of fearless firmness appeared. I could feel the shaking gaze nailed to me until the end. However, it didn't matter. As soon as I came back to the room, I walked to the bed with a nonchalant look and laid down. Eventually I woke up from a nap, skipping lunch, repeating my nap again and again. Miss Penelope, Emily woke me up carefully. When I opened my eyes, my room was dark. The sun had already set. I asked in a hoarse voice, "What's going on?" You should have dinner. You haven't eaten anything since yesterday. Emily suggested a meal in a restless voice. No thanks, I have no appetite. I want to sleep more, I refused and buried my face in the pillow again helplessly. I didn't even have a meal or anything, but I thought I'd get indigestion if I ate something. Miss Emily called me in a voice that was heartbroken at the rejection of food. When I didn't answer because I didn't feel good, one side of the bed suddenly became heavy. That's because Emily snuck into the side of the bed. What is it? I turned my head toward her and asked her what she wanted. Emily hesitated for a moment, then lowered her head and whispered the woman she ended up staying in the mansion. I opened my eyes wide with a little surprise at her behavior of telling her the news about Yvonne. But I knew it would be like that anyway. I quickly lost interest and asked back in a calm manner. She passed all the tests? I think not all, because she lost her memory, so she decided to stay in the mansion and wait for the time being. I see, but it's obvious that it's a fake too. It was a little funny for her to discuss fake with the fake princess. It's okay, you don't have to say that, I answered with a smiling voice. And added a sigh, I think you have something else to say. Do. It was time to let Emily go too. She's under the command of the head maid. And the maid had already served Yvonne in the absence of certainty. I didn't really like our first meeting, but it was true that Emily had made it comfortable here. I think I wasn't a good master, however, thinking that she had been unknowingly affectionate, and that she was even leaving my side. I was speechless. Maybe that's why I kicked her out of the room yesterday. I didn't want to hear my maid quit. But there's no other way, because I'm the one who's going to get kicked out anyway. Fortunately, I gave up quickly. I quietly waited for Emily's next words. I'll tell you of her every move. What? After a long pause, she suddenly uttered unexpected words. What was your favorite part of this video? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Click the bell icon for notifications.